Chapter 16 of Masters of the Vortex by E. Smith. Chapter 16 Vegian Justice. The nearer they got to their destination, the more fidgety Vesta became.
"Oh, I hope Zampitkin could get away and be there by now. I haven't seen him for over half a year."
"Who?" Helen asked.
"My brother, Zamke, you better call him. You can pronounce that. The police officer, you know."
"I thought you saw him this morning," Joan said.
"I saw my other brothers and sisters, but not him. He was tied up on a job. He wasn't sure just when he could get away tonight."
The copter dropped sharply. Vesta seized Cloud's arm and pointed.
"That's where we're going. That big building with the landing field on the roof. The caravansary. Z?"
In moments of emotion and excitement, most of Vesta's sibilants reverted to Z's. "I see. And is this your Great White Way?" It was, but it was not white. Instead, it was a blaze of red, blue, green, yellow, all the colors of the spectrum, and crowds, on foot, on bicycles, on scooters, motorbikes and motor tricycles, in cars and in copters. It seemed impossible that anything could move in such a press as that. And as the air cab approached its destination, Neal Cloud, space-hardened veteran and skillful flyer though he was, found himself twisting wheels, stepping on pedals, and cutting in braking jets, none of which were there. How that jockey landed his heap and got it into the air again all in one piece, without dismembering a single Vegian, Cloud never did quite understand. Blades were scant fractional inches from blades and rotors. People were actually shoved aside by the tapering bumpers of the cab as it hit the deck, but nothing happened. This, it seemed, was normal. The group reformed and in flying wedge fashion as before, gained the elevators and finally hit the ground floor in the ballroom. Here Cloud drew his first full breath for what seemed like hours. The ballroom was tremendous, and it was less than three-quarters filled. Just inside the doorway Vesta paused, sniffing delicately.
"He is here. Come on."
She beckoned the six to follow her and rushed ahead, to be met at the edge of the clear space in head-on collision. Brother and sister embraced fervently for about 2 seconds. Then, reaching down, the man broke his sister's grip and flipped her around sideways through half of a vertical circle so that her feet pointed straight up. Then, with a sharp "Blavska!" he snapped into a backflip.
"Blavska, Zemp!"
she shouted back, bending beautifully into such an arch that, as his feet left the floor, hers landed almost exactly where his had been an instant before. Then for a full minute and a half the joyous pair pinwheeled, without moving from the spot, while the dancers on the floor, standing still now, applauded enthusiastically with stamping, hand-clapping, whistles, catcalls, and screams. Vesta stopped the exhibition finally, and led her brother toward Cloud and Joan. The music resumed, but the dancers did not. Instead, they made a concerted rush for the visitors, surrounding them in circles a dozen deep. Vesta, with both arms wrapped tightly around Cloud and her tail around Joan, shrieked a highly consonantal sentence, which Cloud knew meant, "Lay off these two for a couple of minutes, you howling hyenas. They're mine." Then switched to English. "Go ahead, you four, and have fun." The first two men to lay hands on the two tall Tellurian beauties were, by common consent and without argument, their first partners. Two of the Vegian girls, however, were not so polite. Both had hold of Joe, one by each arm, and stood there spitting insults at each other past his face, until a man standing nearby snapped a few words at them and flipped a coin. The two girls, each still maintaining her grip, leaned over eagerly to see for themselves the result of the toss. The loser promptly relinquished her hold on Joe, and the winner danced away with him.
"Oh, this is wonderful, Storm," Joan thought. "We've been accepted. We're the first group I ever actually knew of to really break through the crust."
The Vegians moved away. Vesta released her captives and turned to her brother.
"Captain Cloud, Captain Janowik, I present to you my brother Zamke," she said. Then to her brother, "They've been very good to me, Zampitkin, both of them, but especially the captain. You know what he did for me."
"Yes, I know." The brother spoke the English S with barely a trace of hardness. He shook Cloud's hand firmly, then bent over the hand, spreading it out so that the palm covered his face, and inhaled deeply, then straightening up. "For what you have done for my sister, sir, I thank you. As she has said, your scent is pleasing, and will be remembered long, enshrined in the place of pleasant odors of our house." Turning to Joan and omitting the handshake, he repeated the performance and bowed. And when an adult male Vegian sets out to make a production of bowing, it is a production well worth seeing. Then, with the suddenest and most complete change of manner either Cloud or Joan had ever seen, he said, "Well, now that the formalities have been taken care of, Joan, how about us hopping a couple of skips around the floor?" Joan was taken slightly aback, but rallied quickly. "Why, I'd love it, but not knowing either the steps or the music, I'm afraid I couldn't follow you very well." "Oh, that won't make any," Zamkey began, but Vesta drowned him out. "Of course it won't make any difference, Joan," she exclaimed. "Just go ahead and dance any way you want to. He'll match your steps. And if he so much as touches one of your slippers with his big fat feet, I'll choke him to death with his own tail." "And I suppose it's irrefutable that you can and will dance with me with equal dexterity, aplomb, and insouciance?" Cloud asked Vesta, quizzically, after Joan and Zamkey had glided smoothly out into the throng. "You said it, little chum," Vesta exclaimed gleefully. "And I know what all those words mean, too, and if I step on either one of your feet, I'll choke myself to death with my own tail, so there." Snuggling up to him blissfully, Vesta let him lead her into the crowd. She of course was a superb dancer, so much so that she made him think himself a much better dancer than he really was. After a few minutes, when he was beginning to relax, he felt an itchy, tickling touch. Something almost impalpable was creeping up his naked back, the fine soft fur of the extreme tip of Vesta's ubiquitous tail. He grabbed for it, but fast as he was, Vesta was faster, and she shrieked with glee as he missed the snatch. "See there, young lady," he said with mock sternness. "If you don't keep your tail where it belongs, I'm going to wrap it around your lovely neck and tie it into a bow knot." Vesta sobered instantly. "Oh, do you really think I'm lovely, Captain Neal, Cloud? My neck, I mean?" "No doubt about it," Cloud declared. "Not only your neck, all of you. You're most certainly one of the most beautiful things I ever saw." "Oh, thanks. I hadn't—" She stared into his eyes for moments, as if trying to decide whether he really meant it or was merely being polite. Then, deciding that he did mean it, she closed her eyes, let her head sink down onto his shoulder, and began to purr blissfully, still matching perfectly whatever motions he chose to make. In a few minutes, however, they heard a partially stifled shriek, and a soprano voice, struggling with laughter, rang out. "Vesta!" "Yes, Babs?" "What do you think of this tail tickling business? I never had to cope with anything like that before." "Bite him!" Vesta called back, loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Bite him good and hard, on the end of the tail. If you can't catch the tail, bite his ear. Bite it good." "Bite him? But I couldn't. Not possibly." "Well, then give him the knee, or clout him a good, solid tunk on the nose. Or, better yet, tell him you won't dance with him any more. He'll be good." "Now you tell us what to do about tail ticklers," Cloud said then. "Suppose I'd take a good bite at your ear." "I'd bite you right back," said Vesta gleefully, "and I bet you'd taste just as nice as you smell." The dance went on, and Cloud finally, by the aid of both Vesta and Zamkey, did finally manage to get one dance with Joan. And, as he had known he would, he enjoyed it immensely. So did she. "Having fun, chum? I never saw you looking so starry-eyed before." "Oh, brother," she breathed, "to say that I was never the belle of any ball in my school days is the understatement of the century. But here, can you imagine it, Storm? Me actually outshining Barbara Benton and Helen Worthington both at once." "Sure I can. I told you." "Of course it's probably because their own women are so big that I'm a sort of curiosity," she rushed on. "But whatever the reason, this dance is going down in my memory book in great big letters and the reddest ink I can find." "Good for you. Hail the conquering heroine," he applauded. "It'll do you good to have your ego inflated a little. But what did you do about this tail tickling routine?" "Oh, I grabbed their tails." With her sense of perception she could, of course. "And when they try to wiggle them free, I wiggle back at them, like this," she demonstrated, "and we have a perfectly wonderful time." Well, I bet you do. And when I get you home, you shameless... Sorry, Storm, my friend. The big Vegian who cut in wasn't sorry at all, and he and Cloud both knew it. You can dance with Joan any time, and we can't, so loosen all clamps, friend. Grab him, Vizelt. Vizelt grabbed. So, in about a minute, did another Vegian girl, and then after a few more minutes, it was Vesta's turn again. No other girl could dance with him more than once, but Vesta, by some prearranged priority, could have him once every 10 minutes. "Where's your brother, Vesta?" he asked once. "I haven't seen him for an hour." "Oh, he had to go back to the police station. They're all excited and working all hours. They're chasing public enemy number 1. A Tellurian they think he is, named Fairchild. Why?" As Cloud started involuntarily in the circle of her arm. "Do you know him?" "I know of him, and that's enough." Then in thought, "Did you get that, Nordquist?" "I got it." Cloud was, as the Lensmen had said he would be, under surveillance every second. Of course, this one may not be Fairchild, since there are 3 or 4 other suspects in other places. But from the horrible time we and the Vegians both are having, trying to locate this bird, I'm coming to think he is. The dance went on until some hours later there was an unusual tumult and confusion at the door. "Oh, the police are calling Vesta. Something has happened," his companion exclaimed. "Let's rush over. Oh, hurry!" Cloud hurried, but as well as hurrying, he sent his sense of perception on ahead, and meshed his mind imperceptibly with Vesta's as well. Her mind was a queerly turbid, violently turbulent mixture of emotions, hot with furiously passionate lust for personal tooth-and-claw revenge, at the same time icily cold with the implacable, unswervable resolve of the dedicated, remorseless, and merciless killer. "Are you sure beyond all doubt that this is the garment of my brother's slayer?" Vesta was demanding. "I am sure," the Vegian policeman replied. Not only did Zampitkin hold it pierced by the first and fourth fingers of his left hand, the sign positive, as you know, but an eyewitness verified the scent and furnished descriptions. The slayer was dressed as an Aldebaran, which accounts for the size of the garment your brother could seize before he died. His 4 bodyguards as Tellurians, with leather belts and holsters for their blasters. QX. Vesta accepted a pair of offered shears, and began to cut off tiny pieces of the cloth. As each piece began to fall, it was seized in midair, and in the meantime other Vegians, forming into a long line, ran past Vesta, each taking a quick sniff and running on, out into the street. Cloud, reaching outside the building with his perceptors, saw that all vehicular traffic had paused. A Vegian stood on the walkway, holding a bit of cloth pinched between thumb and fingernail. All passers-by, on foot or in any kind of vehicle, would pause, sniff at the cloth, and apparently go on about their business. But Cloud, after reading Vesta's mind and the policeman's, turned as white as his space tan would permit. In less than an hour, almost every Vegian in that city of over 8 million would know the murderer by scent and would be sniffing eagerly for him. And when any one of them did find him, except for the 2 Vegians and the 6 Tellurians, the vast hall was now empty. Vesta was holding a pose Cloud had never before seen, stiffly erect, with her tail wrapped tightly around her body. "Can they get a scent, a reliable scent, I mean, that fast?" Cloud asked. "Certainly." Cloud's voice was cold, level, almost uninflected. "How long would it take you to learn that an egg you started to eat was rotten? The man who wore this shirt is a Class A triple prime stinker. His odor's recognizable instantly and anywhere. But as to the rest of it, don't do this thing, Vesta. Let the law handle it. The law comes second. He killed my brother. It is my right and my privilege to kill him." Cloud became conscious of the fact that Joan was in his mind. "You been here all along?" he flashed. "In or near. You and I are one, you know." And Vesta's voice went on. "And besides, the law is merciful. Its death is instant. Under my claws and teeth he will live for hours. For a full day, I hope." "But, officer, can't you do something?" "Nothing. The law comes second. As she has said, it is her right and her privilege." "But it's suicide, man. Sheer suicide. You know that, don't you?" "Not necessarily. She will not be working alone. Whether she lives or dies, however, it is still her right and her privilege. Cloud switched to thought. Nordquist, you can stop this if you want to. Do it. I can't, and you know I can't. The patrol does not and cannot interfere in purely planetary affairs. You intend, then, Cloud demanded furiously, to let this girl put her naked hands and teeth up against 4 trigger-happy gunnies with delameters? Just that. There's nothing else I or any other patrolman can do. To interfere in this one instance would alienate half the planets of civilization and set the patrol back 500 years. Well, even though I'm a patrolman of sorts, I can do something about it, Cloud blazed. And by God, I will! We will, you mean, and we will, too. Joan's thought came forcibly at first, then became dubious. That is, if it doesn't mean getting you blasted, too. Just what? Nordquist's thought was sharp. Oh, I see. And being a Vegian as well as a patrolman, and the acknowledged friend of both the dead man and his sister. Who's a Vegian? Cloud demanded. You are. And so are the other 5 of your group, as you would have been informed if the party had not been broken up so violently. Honorary Vegians for life. Why, I never heard of such a thing, Joan exclaimed, and I studied them for years. No, you never did, Nordquist agreed. There haven't been many honorary Vegians, and to my certain knowledge not one of them has ever talked. Vegians are very strongly psychic in picking their off-world friends. You mean to tell me that bleached blonde over there won't spill everything she knows 15 minutes after we leave here? Cloud demanded. Just that. You can't judge character by hair, even if it were bleached, which it isn't. You owe her an apology, Storm. If you say so, I do, and I hereby apologize, but to get back to the subject, the Lensman went on, narrowing his thought down so sharply as to exclude Joan. You can do something. You're the only one who can. Such being the case, and since you are no longer indispensable, I withdraw all objections. Go ahead. Cloud started a thought, but Joan blanked him out. Lensman, has Storm been sending... Can he send information to you that I can't dig out of his mind? Very easily. He's an exceptionally fine tuner. I'm sorry, Joni, Cloud thought hastily, but it sounded too much like bragging to let you in on. However, you're in from now on. Then aloud, Vesta, I'm staying with you, he said quietly. I was sure you would, she said as quietly. You are my friend and Zamke's. Although your customs are not exactly like ours, a man of your odor does not desert his friends. Cloud turned then to the 4 lieutenants who stood close grouped. Will you 4 kids please go back to the ship and take Joan with you? Not on Thursdays, Storm, Joe said, pointing to an inconspicuous bronze button set into a shoulder strap. We both rate Blaster Expert first. Count us in. And Bob added, Joan has been telling us an earful. And what she didn't tell us a couple of Vegian boys did. The 3 honorary Vegian musketeers, that's us. Lead on, D'Argandon. Bob and Joe are staying too, Vesta, Cloud said then. Of course. I'm sorry I didn't get to tell you myself about being adopted, but I knew somebody would. But you, Joan and Barbara and Helen, you 3'd better go back to the ship. You can be of no use here. 2 of them were willing enough to go, but... Where Neal Cloud goes, I go, Joan said, and there was no doubt whatever that she meant exactly that. Why? Vesta demanded. Commander Cloud, the fastest gunman in all space, is necessary for the success of this our mission. He can, from a cold, bell-toned start at 30 yards, burn the centers out of 6 irregularly spaced targets. Nordquist, lay off. What in the hell do you think you're doing? Cloud thought viciously. I don't think. I know, came instant reply. Do you want her hanging on your left arm when the blasting starts? This is the only possible way Joan Janowik can be handled. Lay off yourself. And Vesta's voice went calmly on. In exactly 249 mils, Lieutenant McKay and Lieutenant Ingalls, although perhaps not absolutely necessary, are highly desirable. They're fast enough and are of deadly accuracy. When either of them shoots a man in a crowd, however large, that one man dies, and not a dozen bystanders. Now just what good would you be, Lieutenant Commander Janowik? Can you fire a blaster with any one of these men, or bite a man's throat out with me? For probably the first time in her life, Joan Janowick stood mute.
And suppose you do come along, Vesta continued relentlessly. With you at his side and the line of fire, do you suppose...
Just a minute. Shut up, Vesta, Cloud ordered roughly. Listen, all of you. The Lensman is doing this, not Vesta, and I'll be damned if I'll let anybody, not even a Lensman, bedevil my Joan this way. So, Joan, wherever we go, you can come along. All I ask is you'll keep a little ways back.
Of course I will, Storm.
And Joan crept into the shelter of his arm. Ha! I thought you'd pop off about this point. Nordquist's thought came chattily into Cloud's mind. Good work, my boy. You've consolidated your position no end. Well, what do we do now? Joe McKay broke the somewhat sticky silence that followed.
We wait, Vesta said calmly. We wait right here until we receive news.
They waited, and as they waited the tension mounted and mounted. Before it became intolerable, however, the news came in, and Cloud, reading Vesta's mind as the ultrasonic information was received, relayed it to other Tellurians. The murderer and his 4 bodyguards were at that moment entering a theater less than 1 city block away.
Why, they couldn't be, Helen protested. Nobody could be that stupid. Or I wonder, too, this from Joan. Yes, it would be the supremely clever thing to do, the perfect place to hide for a few hours, while the worst of the storm blows over, and they can complete their planned getaway. Provided, of course, they're outworlders, and thus don't know what we Vegians can do with our wonderful sense of smell. Of course, they aren't a Tellurian and 4 Aldebarans anymore, are they? No, they're 5 Centralians now, perfectly innocent. They think their blasters are completely hidden under those long overshirts. But now and again a bulge shows. They've still got blasters on their hips. The theater's crowded, but the 5 friends want to sit together. The manager thinks it could be arranged by paying a small gratuity to a few seat holders who would like to make a fast credit that way. He'll place them, and it's almost time for us to go. Bye, Joni. Stay back, remember. And she was in his arms. How about it, Helen? Joe asked. Surely you're going to kiss your Porthos goodbye, aren't you? I've assured him, mon enfant, she exclaimed, and did so with enthusiasm. But it's more like Amaris, I think. He kissed everybody, you know. And since I'm not hooked like Joan is yet, don't think that this is establishing a precedent.
Well, Babs, that leaves you and me. Bob reached out. She was standing beside him, and pulled her close. QX?
Why, I guess so.
Barbara blushed furiously.
But, Bob, is it really dangerous? She whispered.
I don't know. Not very, really, I don't think. At least I certainly hope not. But blasters are not cat pistols, you know. And whenever one goes off, it can raise pure hell. Why, would you really miss me?
You know I would, Bob.
And her kiss had more fervor than either she or he would have believed possible a few minutes before. And at its end she laughed shakily and blushed again as she said,
I got sort of used to having you around, so be sure and come back.
They left the building and walked rapidly along a strangely quiet street to the theater. Without a word they were ushered up a short flight of stairs. Hold up, Vesta, Cloud thought sharply. We can't see a thing. Wait a couple of minutes. They waited 5 minutes, during which time they learned exactly where the enemy were, and discussed every detail of the proposed attack. I still can't see well enough to shoot, Cloud said then. Can they give us a little glow of light? They could. By almost imperceptible increments, the thick, soft blackness was relieved. That's enough. The light, such as it was, steadied.
Ready?
Vesta's voice was a savage growl, low, deep in her throat. Ready.
No more noise, then.
They walked forward to the balcony's edge, leaned over it, looked down. Directly beneath Vesta's head was a seated man in Centralian garb. 4 others were behind, in front of, and at each side of their chief. Now! Vesta yelled, and flung herself over the low railing. At her shout, 4 Vegians ripped 4 Centralian shirts apart, seized 4 hip-holstered blasters, and shouted with glee. But they shouted too soon, for the real gunslick, then as now, did not work from the hip, but out of his sleeve. And these were 4 of the coldest, fastest killers to be found throughout the far-flung empire of Bosconi. Thus all 4 flashed into action even before they began rising to their feet. But so did Stormcloud, and his heavy weapon was already out and ready. He knew what those hands were doing in the instant of their starting to do it, and his delameter flamed 3 times in what was practically one very short blast. He had to move a little before he could sight on the 4th guard. Vesta's furiously active body was in the way, so Joe and Bob each got a shot too. 3 bolts of lightning hit the luckless wight at once, literally cremating him in air as he half crouched, bringing his blaster to bear on the catapulting thing attacking his boss. When Vesta went over the rail, she did not jump to the floor below. Instead, her hands locked on the edge, her feet dug into the lattice work of the apron. She squatted, her tail flashed down, wrapping itself twice around the Zwilnick's neck. She heaved then and climbed with everything she had. As she stood upright on the railing, eager hands reaching down to help her tail lift its burden up into the balcony, the man struck the floor with a thud and Vesta jumped at him. "Your fingers first, one at a time," she snarled, and seizing a hand, she brought it toward her mouth. She paused then as if thunderstruck, a dazed, incredulous expression spreading over her face. Bending over, she felt curiously, tenderly of his neck. "Why, he's dead," she gasped. "His neck, it's broken. From such a little tiny pull as that? Why, anybody ought to have a stronger neck than that." She straightened up then, as a crowd of Vegians and the Tellurian women came up. She became instantly her old gay self. "Well, should we all go back and finish our dance?" "What?" Cloud demanded. "After this?" "Why, certainly," Vesta said brightly. "I'm sorry, of course, that I killed him so quickly, but it doesn't make any real difference. Zamki is avenged. He can now enjoy himself. We'll join him in a few years, more or less. And tell them, what would you do? What you call mourn?" "I don't know. I simply don't know," Cloud said slowly, his arm tightening around Joan's supple waist. "I thought I'd seen everything. But I suppose you can have somebody take that body out to the ship so we can check it for identity." "Oh, yes, I'll do that right away. You sure you don't want to dance any more?" "Very sure, my dear, very sure. All I want to do is take Joan back to the ship." "QX, I won't see you again this trip, then. Your hours are so funny. I'll send for my things. And I won't say goodbye, Captain Neal, Cloud, and you other wonderful people, because we'll see each other again, soon and often. Just so long, and thanks tremendously for all you've done for me." And Vesta the Vegian strode away, purring contentedly to herself, tail high. End of chapter 16.